let me. All right. So it is 2:30. We do have 3 commissioners, so we can get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this rules workshop. I am Amelia Boyd. I am the program manager for the commission and the organizer for this webinar. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available sometime next week. The documents which will be discussed here today are available on our website, which is wmc.wa.gov. Specifically, they are on the rules and progress page. All attendees are muted. Panelists may unmute themselves and share their webcam. Attendees, if you have a question, please use the raise your hand function. I also think the chat function will work. We will get to your questions as quickly as possible, and we have 1 hour scheduled for this webinar. I will begin the roll call of panelists and staff when you call your name. When I call your name, please introduce yourself. Okay, let's start with, hold on, I have to switch out of this mode so I can see who's here. Okay, so Dr. Domino, if you would introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Karen Domino. I'm the current chair of the Washington Medical Commission.
And Dr. Lyle. Oh, sorry, Dr. Lyle.
I'm Sarah Lyle, Commissioner for District 2 on the Medical Commission.
And then Micah.
Micah Matthews, I'm the Deputy Executive Director for the Washington Medical Commission.
And then Ms. Blake, if you would introduce yourself and then start the script, please.
Okay, certainly. Good afternoon. My name is Christine Blake, and I'm a public member of the Commission. I will be the presiding officer for this rules workshop. Today is Thursday, September 28th, 2023, and it is 2:32 p.m. This meeting is being held by a Teams webinar and in person at the Department of Health located at 111 Israel Road Southeast in Tumwater, Washington. The rule being discussed today is regarding WAC 246-919-330, postgraduate medical training. Ms. Boyd, please give an overview of the rules process and the proposed timeline.
Okay, so first we will talk about what is a rule. So it's a regulation that is a written requirement that applies broadly across a group of individuals or entities that enables, guides, or directs them to do something or prohibits them from doing something. And then specifically, a rule establishes or subjects individuals or entities to penalties if it is violated, or is a qualification or requirement that gives a benefit or privilege, or sets qualifications or standards that an individual or entity must meet to get a license or permit, or set standards that must be met before a product or material can be sold. And then why are we creating this rule? So we have already completed emergency rulemaking to make the changes being presented here today. This standard rulemaking process is just to make those changes that are in the emergency rulemaking permanent. And then what we're doing today is removing a barrier for qualified applicants to get a license. And then rulemaking is the best approach because requirements must be in rule to be enforced. And then toggling between 2 screens is very messy. My apologies. And then the proposed timeline is, as you see here, this should be a pretty quick turnaround because we have already have the emergency rules in place, and this is just standard rulemaking. And so we filed our 101 last month. I plan to only have this one workshop unless something changes during this workshop today, and then we will file the 102, which is the formal proposal, in November. And then by March, hopefully earlier, we'll have a public hearing and accept written comments at that time. And then by June, we will hopefully be adopting the rule, making the emergency rulemaking permanent. And then hopefully by fall of 24, the rules are in effect. My actual hope is that we get this done a lot faster because the emergency rules are already in place.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Are there any questions regarding the rules process and proposed timeline? Hearing none. The next item on the agenda is discussion and comments. Ms. Boyd, please share any comments that we have received.
We haven't received any comments about this particular rulemaking. Other than the one we received for the emergency rulemaking, which was from WISMA, which was in support of this change.
Thank you. Ms. Boyd, please present the draft language and I will open the floor for discussion of each.
If I can do that, please. Okay, so the draft language is specifically in subsection 4. And again, we already have emergency rules that have made this change. And the emergency rules have removed the word consecutive. And then the statement here in no more than 2 programs. And so that is our only change that we're planning to make as part of this rulemaking to mirror what we have done in the emergency rulemaking.
So we just
Amelia.
need your.
Yeah, always see is the PowerPoint non-presentation.
Hold on. Let me fix it. I gotta stop sharing. Reshare. Okay, now can you see it? Okay, perfect. So again, we're removing this consecutive word and then in no more than 2 programs. That's our only change.
Any comments that are coming in, Ms. Boyd, on the chat or anything?
Hold on, let me see if I can do this differently. There we go. We don't have any hands raised. Except for Dr. Domino's.
Yeah,
Dr.
I just had a
Domino?
question. Since
Sorry.
I work at the university, we have a lot of colleagues who've trained elsewhere and have boards in their country and come here. How does this affect them?
Sorry, Dr. Domino, could you get a little bit closer to your microphone? I had a lot of trouble
Sure.
hearing you there.
I can turn my speaker up as well. So I was wondering how this affects people who are fully trained in another country other than Canada, who come here to work at the University of Washington and its hospitals.
Sure. So there's a couple of different issues at play that what you're talking about there. The first one is the way we usually deal with that is a teaching and research license, and so that's limited to a institution or a program, and those get issued. And there's a pathway to full licensure if they hold the position of clinical associate or clinical professor for, I believe, 3 years, and they have no discipline for 5 years. They still have to pass USMLE's step 1, 2, and 3 and do an FBI background check. So that's typically how that's done. There are some exceptional waivers that we've been directed to develop, and we, as part of Panel L, Dr. Lyle and Ms. Blake will remember that we have initiated that waiver process and formalized it in a procedure. However, we've received fairly recent legal advice that we could consider expanding that waiver as far as what it would apply to and what we could consider waiving. In this case, this language with the deletions almost exactly mirror what is contained in RCW 1871-055, which is for, I believe, domestic graduates. Or I'm sorry, schools of medicine requires for approval. And so under 1871-050, which is applying to United States and Canadian graduates, the requirement is that they complete 2 years of postgraduate training. And so our rule in this case I believe in 2020, added in the consecutive and no more than 2 programs. I apologize that I don't have a lot of reasoning as to why that was added. We've gone back and we've looked at notes, we've listened to recordings, and it was just it was inserted. I'm sure there was a reason at that time, but it wasn't captured within the recordings or anything. So as far as how it applies to the foreign medical graduates or international medical graduates, it doesn't. They still have the same requirement to complete 2 years of training. What this is correcting is something that UW brought to us, which is people that graduated from an international medical school and then coming to do a residency at UW. The process that was communicated to us, and I saw that Gabrielle Pett is on, so if she wants to correct me or clarify, I fully encourage it. But my understanding is with these international graduates, they would be board eligible, but they are completing not necessarily consecutive accredited years within a program. So the radiology example was the first year might be accredited, the second year might not, the third year would be. So technically, they've completed 4 years of training, 2 of which was accredited, and they are board eligible at the end of that. But this rule would prevent them from getting a license because it's not consecutive. And I think I see Gabrielle's hand.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Gabrielle.
Hi, thank you. Yes, so specific to the University of Washington, we do have an alternate pathway to board certification through the American Board of Radiology that our Department of Radiology offers to IMGs. It is 4 years of training. As Micah mentioned, it can be ACGME, non-ACGME, could also include a faculty appointment. And then after 4 years, they're board eligible. Most of our trainees in the pathway do consecutive years of ACGME training, but we were finding a few people who were not doing consecutive years of ACGME training, so could be years 1 and 3. And so they would complete the pathway and not be eligible for a full license in Washington State under this new requirement.
Thank you. Did that answer your question, Dr. Domino?
Yes, it does. I'm glad you got rid of consecutive and no more than 2 programs.
Any other questions from any of the attendees?
There's no other hands raised.
How about folks are here in the meeting?
Did you have any questions, Dr. Lyle? Doesn't look like we have anybody else who has a question. Well, except for Micah.
Not a question, just a clarification of the landscape. So Amelia mentioned that we've had emergency rulemaking in place. I'd also remind you that you have taken a vote as a commission to grant staff discretionary enforcement authority regarding this issue as well. So nothing is going to stop us from issuing a license currently. This is what I would call formalization of that policy. So that's what you're voting on in my view.
And there doesn't appear to be any other questions from what I can tell. So thank you all for your participation. Ms. Boyd will now discuss our next steps and provide contact information.
Okay, so let me reshare. Okay, so our next steps are to present the draft language at the Commission's October 20th business meeting. And then at that time, we will ask for the full commission to approve that language, and then we will move on to the CR 102 process, which is the next step. And then we will have a rules hearing, hopefully sometime early next year, where these rules will be made permanent. And then if you have any questions or other comments, you can send them to medical.rules@wmc.wa.gov.
Thank you. Are there any more additional questions or comments? If not, then no others. Then I will close this workshop. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you, everyone.